What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining us on another FCP Euro DIY. Today, we're going to be working on a 2006 Porsche Cayman 987.1. Today on the Cayman behind me, we're going to be covering how to do an ignition coil and spark plug tune-up. In front of us, we have one of the kits available on fcpo.com, which includes the updated ignition coils as well as your new Bosch spark plugs. The new updated ignition coils are a little bit taller than the standard OE ones that came with the car from the factory. These are a later style. And they also come with new hardware. Since these are a bit taller, you're going to need a longer bolt. So that is all included within the kit. Typically, Porsche recommends you do the service every 4 years or 40,000 miles. That's mainly looking at the plugs. Ignition coils tend to last a bit longer. The car behind us has 100,000 miles on it, 98,000 to be exact. It's still in its original coils, and we're about to find out today if it's the original plugs or not. Typically, once an ignition coil starts to fail, it's just going to fail. You're going to get a misfire code. If there are, a lot of them are failing, you get a multiple misfire code. Sometimes you'll get cylinder 1 or cylinder 3. An easy way to check if it's actually the coil versus the plug is, scan the car, clear the code, swap the coil around. If the code follows the coil, then you know that you have a bad coil. If it doesn't follow, then you want to look at the spark plugs next. So whenever you're doing one, it's best to do both if possible. It's going to be a little bit tight, but I think we'll be able to get through it no problem. This DIY is going to be applicable to your 996s, your 997.1s, your 987.1s. So before we get to it, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this DIY. For this job, you're going to need a torque wrench, something that can handle 8 Newton meters all the way to 30 Newton meters. We have a 3/8 drive that has a flex head. This is going to be key for the tight space that we're going to be working on. Same thing goes for our 3/8 drive ratchet. It has a flex head. These are gear wrench ones available on the site. We'll also link them in the description below. Makes life a little bit easier when you're working on tight spots. You're going to need a 5/8 socket or spark plug socket. We have 2 different ones from Gear Wrench. Same thing, we will link them below. One is longer, one is shorter with a built-in swivel extension. Again, making life just a little bit easier. We may use a combination of both or just one, depending on how much room we have to work with, along with a 3-inch extension for that ratchet. We also have an E10 ratcheting wrench. Just in case we don't have room to put a whole socket and ratchet in place to get the ignition coils out. A small flathead and or a small pick is going to come in handy, especially with the electrical connectors. We have some pliers. The boots can be a little bit pesky over the connectors for the ignition coils, just from doing them on the 996 that we did last time. They were a bit annoying, so this will come in handy to reach up in there. Dielectric grease, which is also included with your ignition coil kit. I like using these for these just because the coils are bolted down. I'm not worried about them slipping off like something you would see on an N52 as an example. As far as sockets go, we have a 10 mil, we have an E10, and we have a T25. And then an electric ratchet just makes some of the smaller hardware easier to remove and install. Now with that, let's go ahead and get started on this DIY. All right, my good people, we are under the Cayman. We're going to start by getting access to our coils. Now, everything's a little bit tight here. They're hidden just above the exhaust manifolds. We can see the side of the cylinder heads. In order to give ourselves a little bit more wrenching room and a little bit more room for the cameras, we're going to remove this bottom portion of the splash shield. It's held in by 3 10mm nuts and 4 T25s, 2 on either end. So we're going to go ahead and zap those out first. Or just be mindful, there can be debris up here that can fall on you in your face when you're working on the car, especially on the shop floor and the driveway. We just had this car apart yesterday for other DIYs, so the car is nice and cool. This has been cleaned. Keep that in mind whenever you're doing spark plugs on any vehicle. You want a nice, cool engine to work on. You don't want to do it when it's hot. We're just going to slide this back, find the lift arm a little bit there, get our metal clip. This just goes around the shield right here. It's going to help brace it up against the bottom of this brace. All right, now we have the shield off. We have a better view of either side of the cylinder head. So we're going to start on the driver's bank and get started with removing some ignition coils. Here's a better view of our ignition coil. You can see the electrical connector plug up top. They have little rubber boots that we're going to slide back to access the tab on each connector. And then we can go ahead and unbolt them from there. All right, first thing we're gonna do is disconnect the electrical connector going to our ignition coil. So you can see these have a little like weather protecting boot that's not really doing anything in this car right now. We have a small electrical tab here that we're gonna push on and then pop the connector itself up. And I'm just gonna reach with one finger. There we go, we got it popped open. Now using a small pick, I'm just gonna work the plug housing up. And while we have a good shot of it, we'll go ahead and do the second one now as well. There we go. This we're just gonna pop out of the way, just an oxygen sensor harness cable. We're just gonna lower that. And we're gonna remove, if we need to, this E10, but for now we're just gonna work on the two E10s that hold the ignition coil down. And if that other E10 bracket gets in our way, we'll pop that one off as well. All right, we have our E10 on our 3/8 drive ratchet. We're just gonna go ahead and break these free. This AC line can get a little bit in the way, but once you break these free, you should be able to remove them the rest of the way by hand. And then with both of those popped out, we can go ahead and work this ignition coil back. There we go, a little flathead action to force it to come out. Push back this AC line. The end of these coils are flexible, so you can just drag them down. And with this out, now we're gonna work on getting our spark plug out. So let's get our spark plug socket and get going on that. All right, next we're gonna get our spark plug socket in. Again, this is the gear wrench 5/8 with the adapter or swivel adapter already built in. I'm gonna feed that in like so. Then we'll get our small extension. This is a 3-inch extension, might be a little bit overkill, but we'll see what we got here. Then we'll take our 3/8 drive ratchet, kind of push these AC lines out of our way a little bit. This is indeed a cruddy looking plug. We'll give you a closer look at these in just a moment, but these are definitely due for a replacement. Bosch Shoopers. Nice. All right, now we have our old plug out. We're gonna go ahead and install our new one. We're gonna torque it to 30 Newton meters. If you're gonna be reusing your plugs, maybe you just pull them out to do a bore score check, or maybe you're just replacing something else and you wanna pop them out, to retorque those at 26 Newton meters. So new plugs, 30 Newton meters, old plugs, 26. Again, using the 5/8 socket from Gear Wrench. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and feed in our new spark plug. We have it in our socket. We're just gonna gently get it in there. Whenever you're doing plugs on any vehicle, I always recommend you get the plug in gently seated. Turn it back a few turns just to make sure that the threads didn't engage improperly, and then you can go ahead and turn them in by hand. Again, we're gonna torque this down to 30 Newton meters. These are brand new plugs. First, we're gonna bottom them out by hand. All right, now we're gonna take our torque wrench set to 30, and we have our small 3-inch extension on here. All right, now with that, we can go ahead and remove our tool. All right, now we're gonna continue on with the second plug-in coil. And basically we're just gonna be pulling out all the ignition coils and then swapping out the plugs. And then we'll install all the coils once more once we have the last one on this bank done. That way we have enough room to work with. We can get our big mitts in here and the ignition coils are not in our way. Once you break these loose, you can just pull them out by hand the rest of the way. All right, this plug looks a lot better than the first one. Let's go ahead and get it swapped out. All right, same thing, we're gonna gently feed in our plug. All right, now we're gonna move on to ignition coil number 3, get that one out and get our spark plug out and replaced. And we have to unplug it still from the electrical connector. Now we have some better light on it. We can see that rubber boot. Go ahead and just slide that up. And you can see the small tab that you're going to want to press to release the connector from the coil. It's giving you a bit of a hard time. Just use a small pick or a small flathead screwdriver to kind of course it off. These have been on here for a long time, so sometimes they don't want to move. And there we go. And just slide that up out of the way. Now we have two E10s to remove. We're going to swap over to our E-Torx 10mm wrench. This one just gets a little bit easier in here. There we go. That was a little bit annoying to get in there with the torque wrench, but we got it. All right, we have our new ignition coil. Since these are bolted down, I feel comfortable and I like to use a little bit of dielectric grease inside the boot, which is also included with the tune-up kit. Just gonna squirt a small amount. We don't need a whole lot, just a little bit on half the side there. It'll smear on as we install it. I'm gonna do this to all of the ignition coils, get them in. I'm going to start the E10 Torx by hand and then just snug them down with the calibrated wrist. But if you want to torque them down, they get torqued down to 10 Newton meters. So not a whole lot. So with that, let's go ahead and pop these in. Feed that in all the way down until it bottoms out. For those of you with an eagle eye, you will notice that the ignition coils that we pulled out of this car were already the updated ones. Now we're going to go ahead and get these two E10s started by hand. All right, again, the torque spec for these two E10s is 10 Newton meters. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and plug in our electrical connector. First, let me slide this weather protectant boot up out of my way here. All right, now we're gonna clip in our electrical connector. There we go. Listen for that satisfying click. And then we're gonna pull our weather protecting boot over, which they were not on before, just like so. Now we're gonna go ahead and do the exact same thing in the next two cylinders so we can pick it back up on the passenger side bank. Now, one thing I wanted to point out, don't be like me. There's one small bracket here that holds on the shielding underneath the car. It's only held in by one 10mm nut. If you remove this, it's gonna give you so much more room to work with in this area. So I did this about halfway too late, but for you, my good people, we'll make sure to make a note of it at the beginning of the video before we start pulling out ignition coils. So go ahead and remove this 10mm nut and it'll make your life so much easier. All right, my good people, at this point we have the driver's side bank done. All our ignition coils are in, our new spark plugs, everything's plugged in, and we brought down that weather stripping boot over the electrical connector, which wasn't really on the old ones to begin with. Again, be mindful of this brace here. We have one 10mm nut on this side that we're gonna remove just to give our arms some more room to work with. But overall, the process should be exactly the same on the passenger bank, so let's get to it. All right, now we have that out of the way, we have easier room to reach up in here. So let's go ahead and get started on the passenger side. We'll take off the connectors, the ignition coils, we'll do the plugs, and then we'll work from the back ignition coil first forward, just so we have enough room to work with everything in here since it's a bit tight. All right, at this point we have all our ignition coils and our spark plugs torqued down, plugged in, ready to rock and roll. Next thing we're going to do is install the bracket with the 10mm nut, the one that will slice your forearm open if you don't remove it. And then we'll install our splash shield and wrap up this DIY. We're going to go ahead and install our 10mm nut, or in this case, we have a bolt now, just to fix what broke before in this car. This bracket holds on our splash shield. Beautiful. All right, my good people, at this point we have our brackets back on. We have our ignition coils and everything buttoned up. All that we have left to do is install our splash shield. So let's do that now. These just kind of key into each other, a bunch of little flaps that you kind of piece together as you slide it on. Obviously, we're on the lift here, so it's actually fighting us a little bit because of the lift arms, but first world problems, you know? I know you don't feel bad. I don't even feel bad. Now we can do our 3 10mm nuts, 2 plastic ones, 1 metal one. Just be mindful with the plastic ones, you don't want to tighten these all the way to the max or you will strip them out. All right, my good people, and that is going to conclude this DIY for today. Overall, a little bit of a tight, cramped job on the 987, as you can imagine. Mainly the 2 rear cylinders are the toughest ones to get to, just because you can see the least. And to be quite honest, the thing that hung us up the most today was just the weather protectant boots over the electrical connectors. They've been on there for so long that trying to slide those back to get access to the plug itself, to get them back on, was probably the hardest part. So overall, definitely a DIY friendly job. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave those in the comment section below. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.